It's been about 6 months since I first got my hands on this Jetson or Nano Super developer kit, and truthfully this Jetson has been a fantastic little device throughout the past 6 months. Today's video is going to not only focus on some cool use cases for this, but about how the field has progressed over the last 6 months into agentic use cases being very popular and a big buzzword around anyone who is interested in AI. So for today's video, we're going to take a look at this device around 6 months later, which is current. However, we're going to look at it through the lens of what we can actually use it for in this new agentic landscape that has been very popular lately. Now, I will say, when this came out, it was touted as the $249 quote-unquote AI supercomputer, and even now, about half a year later, it definitely does still feel like an all-in-one device. It kind of just does everything. The only complaint I have about this, which leads me into my next segment, is that it does feel a bit naked when it's just sitting there on your desk, kind of like this. There were not a lot of cases available for the Jetson, but I'm happy to report that in this box we have a new entry which is quite nice. This is the Roboco Panini case. I have an engineering sample here from Roboco, who is a Taiwanese company that manufactures AI peripherals. They were kind enough to send this to me, and I do have to say, it's constructed extremely robustly, it's metal, and it has some really nice features to accommodate the Jetson or a Nano. For a quick tour of the Roboco Panini, we can see that on the front we have a customizable OLED display as well as power and reset buttons, which are very good to have for the Jetson that otherwise does not have those. The side cutout here is actually so cameras can be connected to the device while it's in this case, and obviously the back has the cutout ports properly for this device. Something cool is the removable bottom panel, so you can access the NVMe without actually having to take the case apart and take the Jetson out of it, which is really good and nice attention to detail. Installation is really quite simple. We just take these two thumb screws off and then slide the top panel off using the little leather strap. There are these kind of grates for cooling, which is good to see. In addition to that, we have all of the cables and everything to connect our power button and the OLED screen as well as the reset button. This actually allows us to keep that plastic bumper I just showed on there, which is very important because that is where the Wi-Fi antennas live for this Jetson. There's one more thumb screw to remove so that we can actually get the Jetson in there, and as well as plugging in the power switch, reset switch, and the LED. These are all labeled on the Jetson board, which is very nice, so we can easily do that and then just slide it in to the back tabs, which keep it in place. Once it's in the case and the screen has been connected in front, we can just go ahead and put in a camera cable if we want, because we have that cool little cutout there. For my purpose, I'm not going to be using a camera cable today, so I will remove that, and then we just slide the metal top back on, put the thumb screws back in, and then everything is all set. So that unboxing, of course, was for the Roboco Panini, which will be available around the end of September on Newegg for around $90. I really like this. I have actually been using this. It's metal. It's not cheap feeling. It's really quite heavy even without the Jetson. It has the OLED status display and the power button, so you don't have to worry about plugging in and out to actually turn the Jetson off like you do with no case. And really, the only thing I want to specifically mention that I think is pretty cool about this is beyond the camera slot here, it was very well thought out, so you can just remove the bottom panel and access the NVMe, which a lot of folks were interested in putting in the Jetson, as it is a very big quality of life improvement. So with that, I am going to slide this back in and I will screw it in. And then we'll go ahead and make a fun little Discord agent bot using n8n, our Jetson or Nano, and our Roboco Panini. Now, because I'd like to showcase this Jetson doing something that could be considered quote-unquote agentic, we're going to go ahead and actually build a little Discord bot that uses a local LLM from this Jetson to basically send a message to a Discord server every X amount of time interval that we designate. Now, truthfully, I'm not the biggest fan of n8n, but I cannot deny that, especially for beginner use cases, it is very eloquent and easy to just wire different things up to accomplish tasks. Now, fortunately, the n8n installation on the Jetson is extremely simple, as it uses Docker, which will have been set up as part of the Jetson install and setup process. If you have watched my previous full hour or something long setup tutorial for the Jetson, you will basically be ready to just go ahead and immediately start playing with n8n through the Docker install. So we are going to begin from there and just assume that that's where the point we're at is. So I've just gone ahead and opened a terminal here, and really, like I said, this is like very easy, these install commands. All we're going to do is from the Docker installation on the n8n documentation page, we're just going to copy paste this command right here into the terminal. And when we do that, it will go ahead and just kind of pull the image, since obviously if you do remember from a while back, if it can't find the image locally, it knows, oh, I need to go and grab this, and then it will go ahead and actually begin to download this. Once this is complete, we'll basically be able to navigate to the URL that Docker uses, which is localhost at port 5678, and we will get our first look at the Docker canvas and then be able to actually start creating our agent. Now that our Docker image is successfully downloaded and running, we can just go ahead and control click on the link that shows up in the terminal, and we will need to just set up an owner account, which I kind of already just have saved. So I am resetting up this owner account, but again, this can be anything. It doesn't have to be a real email or anything like that if you do not want it to be. And once we do that, I can kind of just skip all of this. And then we will be met with our first look at n8n, which I would assume most people are like partially familiar with, at least if they're interested in this area. And really, I can go ahead and kind of just minimize this terminal now, as we're not going to need to look through that at all. And I will full screen this so we can go ahead and create our first workflow, which we're just going to do by selecting Start from Scratch. Now that n8n is open and we have a blank canvas right here, we're going to begin by creating our fun little Discord bot that will use a uncensored model to send a message whatever interval that we designate it to. The first thing we're going to do is just click right here with add first step, and we're going to type, I'm personally going to type cron because that's how I'm familiar with like the schedule trigger terminology, but if we type that, it will pop up right here as a schedule trigger. With this, we can set our trigger interval, which personally I think for the scope of this video I will set to be rather like often, so I think 1 minute should probably do the trick. Now following that, our next step is to go ahead and actually set this up to utilize a local LLM running on this Jetson through Ollama. From this, we will just go to the top right again and open the node panel and type Ollama. Now there are two options here that show up. There is Ollama model and Ollama chat model. For the purpose of this, I'm just doing Ollama model, as we are not going to be actually like kind of chatting back and forth with this model. From this section, it can get a little frustrating to get everything working from a networking perspective, being that things on the Jetson are very containerized, and even this n8n instance is just kind of running through a Docker container. So it's going to prompt us to set a connection to Ollama with our credentials. If we go here to try to edit said credentials, we will see that it is not going to be able to connect with these settings. So there are a few things that we can kind of check in order to troubleshoot this. The first thing we're going to do is just open a new terminal window and type hostname and then -I, capital I, not lowercase I. We're going to see two IP addresses. The first is kind of just like the IP address of this Jetson on my network, but the second is the one that we're interested right here, and we're going to take it and we're going to copy it and close out of this. So instead of just having this running here on this 127.0.0.1 address, we're going to just replace that with the second of the two IP addresses that we saw appear in the terminal, and then we have that. So we're going to save it, and then it will automatically kind of test the connection when we save it. And fortunately, it has successfully been tested here. Now, it is a possibility that if you do that, it also may not work. So there's one other thing we can take a look at to ensure that is correctly configured. The second thing that we're going to check is just to open a new terminal window, and we are going to type sudo systemctl edit and then ollama.service. Now, we will be prompted for our user password, and there is like kind of a, like think of how I'm talking right here. There's like branches of each section that I'm mentioning. So before I mention this, I would like to preface this by saying that my Jetson is set up so that Ollama is not running in a container or anything. It's not running in any virtual environments. It is just kind of installed on like the base system, if you will. And what I mean by that is if I open a terminal window here without doing anything else and type Ollama list, it will show me all of my installed Ollama models, just to kind of show that Ollama is not installed in any containerized environment or anything on my system. So these tips may only work for someone else who has it in that similar setup. Now, back to the setup file that we're in right here. Basically, we can just think of this as an Ollama kind of configuration file, if you will. And from here, we see that everything is kind of commented out, except this line right here, where it has a little service tag, and then this environment variable is set Ollama host at 0.0.0.0. Now, truthfully, I'm not 100% sure that this is necessary, but in trying to troubleshoot this was one of the steps that I just kind of followed prior to just trying it with the Docker container IP address or something like that. So basically the TLDR of this is that if you do struggle with getting Ollama to connect with your Docker container, these are two things that you can try and will very likely get you past that roadblock, if you will. Now, as I take a breath, because I've been talking a lot, I can just go ahead and close out of this pane right here in n8n for setting up the credentials with Ollama. And from there, I am going to, that's odd. It should list my Ollama model. So let's move some of these out of the way. We'll go back in here. Okay, so kind of just closing out of it and then reopening it, shocked it into working. And from here, I am going to select the Josephied Qwen 2.5 1.5B model. You could also use a smaller model like the Qwen 3 0.6B, but for this task, this is a thinking model, and even if I tell it not to think, it will still kind of send the think tags over to Discord, which is just like nasty quality of life. So we're going to just select this one, and then basically for now, I am just going to go back to the canvas right there where we can see it has become somewhat messy. Now, in adding this Ollama model node in, we will see that there are a few other things that come with it. One is this basic LLM chain, and the other is this kind of, think of it as a trigger. So when a chat message is received, it will then call the model and trigger these actions. I am going to actually just delete this, since our trigger for the model actually performing actions is this kind of like cron job or schedule trigger right here. So I will just drag it in like this to trigger the action, I suppose. The next and final node that we are going to need to add is one to just kind of hook this all into Discord. So from the nodes panel, we are going to open it and then just type Discord right here. And as we click on this first one, we will see that a submenu appears with a lot of different actions that we can kind of get this node to perform on our behalf. In this case, I am just going to set it to send a message. And this will then go ahead and open up a window to further configure this node. Now, keep in mind, I'm not like an expert on Discord bots or anything like that. So the way I go about setting this up right here is just a simple and kind of like the path of least resistance way to get this working, at least that I figured. So from the connection type, we are going to change this to a webhook. And from there, we are actually going to hop over to Discord and pick the channel that we want to perform these actions in. In this case, I have an AI testing channel, and from within this channel, I'm just going to select the settings button right here. Under integrations, we can scroll down and then we can see the webhooks section. From in here, we are going to select the button right here to create a new webhook. Now, I am not going to actually select this, as you need to think of this as like a private, like an API key or something that you would not want to share publicly. But when you do that, it will give you the option to actually copy the webhook, which you will then go ahead and do. Now, from there, you will go back to the Discord node that we have created, and we will basically just hit the drop down right here once we have the webhook set up and paste in the URL for that webhook that we have just copied from Discord to right here. So because I already have these webhooks created, I'm just going to copy the URL right there from the one that was already created, and I will go ahead and paste it in right here. It will not actually publicly display it, so I don't have to worry about that. And then I will select save. So these credentials have been created, and we actually have the capability now for this to autonomously post on Discord on our behalf. The next thing we need to do now is just a little bit of connections. So essentially all we're going to do is drag this output from the basic LLM chain into the input of this Discord node. And from there, we have a little bit more configuration to do, but we are almost at the point where this will work. Because that is the case, I want to go ahead and now just kind of do execute workflow just to see like what happens. Obviously, it's not going to work. And the error we get is that there is not a prompt specified in this basic LLM chain node. Clicking on this, we're basically going to see that the source for prompt is already set to the connected chat trigger node, which we don't want. We kind of just want to give this thing a text prompt to denote what its behavior should be. Being that that is the case, we'll just click the drop down arrow right here and change from this to the define below option, not auction. And then we just put in our prompt. So in this case, I'm just going to type something like, very simple and stupid, but you must write funny jokes. From that, I'm just going to go back to the canvas. So the model will actually produce a funny joke now when we do the execute workflow. It will obviously not go and post to Discord yet because some of the things are not properly configured. And keep in mind that when you first run the model, it could take a little while for it to get loaded and set up and everything like that. But this is truthfully one of the ways in which this Jetson can be very useful for low power and agentic things is, think about it. This is using a local LLM to send a Discord message every X amount of time. It is using a very minimal amount of power comparatively, and we have full control over this model that's running. We don't have to pay API costs. We don't have to worry about any censorship if that's something you're concerned about. And it is truthfully under our full control, running agentically on a Jetson. So this is something that I kind of think is very cool and useful. Is this is an edge device, meaning that it kind of sips power and is designed to be deployed in environments where power to performance ratios are very important. All right, so that has configured or completed now, and we see it failed in the Discord node because we have not correctly configured the next step. So if we go in here and click on this Discord node right here, we're going to see that the input of the actual text shows up, and it basically just made a stupid joke saying, why was the math book sad? Because it had too many problems. So the final thing to configure is basically going ahead and just dragging this thing that says text into the message field here in this Discord node. And then that should no longer appear. It should show us a pop-up that says you just connected data or something of the sort, but we can kind of ignore that. And let's just try running this workflow one more time. And we'll keep an eye on our Discord tab right here. So I got the little sound notification. And if I close this and go back into this channel, here is our successfully created joke. Now remember that we set this to send a joke autonomously every minute. So hypothetically, by the time I am done speaking, hopefully if I can talk for a minute, we will see another joke appear in here autonomously. So I made a mistake. I forgot to set this workflow as active. So that is what the final piece of the puzzle would be for this to actually go ahead and trigger itself every minute. I was kind of sitting there just waiting and being like, I think it's been a minute. And I forgot that that is very important there for actually activating our workflow. And now we can see it sent another one in. Okay, it sent the stupid math book thing. And obviously the model you use for this is dependent on your style of whatever you want this to do. Obviously the system prompt that we enter for the model will guide a lot of what it does here as well. So that's just kind of a simple example, but a way that this Jetson is still useful in today's AI climate, which is focused on agentic anything, I suppose could be said. And we see it did the go-to joke of scientists trusting atoms, but that shows that it's now functioning, and basically I can just leave this alone and this channel will continuously get spammed every minute with corny AI jokes. With that, that is going to wrap this video up. The Roboco case is very cool, and I want to thank Roboco for sending that over, as it gives the Jetson a nice complete package in which to exist in my life, as is something nice to have. I just don't like having it naked on the table like that. I know this won't happen, but I would always feel like, oh, I'm going to get electrocuted if I touch one of the GPIO headers, which won't happen, but it's just, I'm not quite sure what to make of that fear. Other than that, that is going to wrap up today's video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Sometime in the future, perhaps I would like to just put this little n8n Discord bot tutorial on my website, so you can just copy paste or follow along. You can actually just copy paste the entire JSON for the workflow into an n8n, a blank workspace. So that may be something folks like to do as well. With that, thank you for watching. We're probably on the cusp of getting another joke right here. Oh no, we did. It just regurgitated the same one. All right, well, there's only so much I can do in the video here before it gets, All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching.